A little bit about DDT, the chemical Al Capone, I call it. It was such a loved chemical. It was the darling of the world, really, because it saved lives, and it continues to save lives today, but with a very dark side to it. So it's not used in the United States anymore. It was ended in 1972, but in places like Africa, the use of it is still going strong because it is such a powerful weapon against mosquitoes, and especially in Africa with malaria, it is a very, very popular form of insecticide. So, so it's a double-edged sword. But as you can see, it's not water soluble. It's not biodegradable. So the amount of DDT that was used from about let's say 1940, 1938, 1940 till 1972, in the United States alone, just domestically, we used 1,350,000,000 pounds of a pesticide that will never go away. Each and every one of us has it in our bodies today. It was amazing how much they used, how much it was spread on everything. It was like, oh my God, it's going to get rid of all the bugs, and so we sprayed it everywhere. We put it on our bodies. So this is one of the ways they applied it. They applied it with trucks and just sprayed it all over neighborhoods and sprayed it all over people. And it had no ill effects on other living things, only insects, or so they thought. So I want all of you to get together and say it along with me. Dichlorodethenyl trichloroethane, DDT. It was actually discovered it's a synthetic chemical, so it was created in 1873 by a Swiss scientist. But it really didn't come about to be what it's known as today until 1936, when another Swiss chemist named Paul Hermann Mueller found it. And he was working as a chemist in Switzerland on tanning products, and for some reason DDT was a byproduct of one of these tanning chemicals that he was working with. And for whatever reason, he had a feeling that it was a pesticide and it was something he could use to destroy insects, and so he brought some home and tested it on houseflies. And that's when he realized that he had something really important. And at that point, it ended up that Mueller won the Nobel Prize for medicine, even though he wasn't a doctor at all and he never wrote medical anything. He was just a chemist. He won the Nobel Prize for medicine in 1948. But really, at the height of his popularity, he just kind of disappeared. I don't know if it was, he was shamed afterwards or whatever. But it was pretty incredible how this thing took off after 1936 with the onset of World War II. The advertisements that are just absolutely incredible. DDT is good for me. That's from 1947. Historical use of DDT, and this is from Pakistan. They just sprayed it directly on people, on children, in the water, over the land, everywhere. They were trying to eradicate one insect. They were going to spray every single plant and every single animal to eradicate that one insect. He's got his gas mask on, but nobody else does. This is crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. And of course, what was incredible and most effective, the federal government actually had a hold on DDT because it was so useful during World War II. It was used in the South Pacific obviously as a way to get rid of mosquitoes that would cause malaria and kill our soldiers, and also as a delousing method of getting rid of head lice and any other kind. This thing killed literally every single insect imaginable. So the federal government, up until 1948, had a hold on DDT. They completely controlled it, and then after that, it was unleashed into the Food and Drug Administration that deemed it safe for all living things except insects, and the fun continued. Gypsy moth spraying programs. This is 1947, I believe, as well. So they just loaded up those planes and would fly all over and just spray, and do some more spraying. And then into the home. These are crazy. Black flag, long preferred by housewives everywhere. It's always the housewives. For quickly killing flies and mosquitoes on contact, now does double duty. The amazing DDT ingredient, now in black flag, stays on walls, floors, doorways to keep on killing flies for weeks. Forever, really. To use wonderful DDT safely, Oh my goodness. And effectively, in your home, use only a well-known and reliable insecticide. Ask for black flag. And look at that happy little baby. The ladies know what's good, everybody. It's simple to use, no muss. Just spray this sure death to most household insect pests. And we were really obsessed with this. This is my all-time favorite. This is wallpaper that you could buy that was treated with DDT. The best part, they were Disney characters. It was Disney characters. Look at that. Isn't that great? Oh my goodness, Donald Duck. Ooh, look, it's Pluto too. It's just kind of a cute little, some of the little cartoon thing. Goodbye, boys. It's Bugaboo, with or without DDT. Mothballs. They could take care of the moths that would eat all of your woolens. And then, of course, they were protecting your crops as well. We were spraying it all over our food, settling into the ground for orchards and vegetables and agricultural use. And just to prove how safe it was, this model in the 1948, stood in a cloud of DDT, eating her hamburger and drinking her Coca-Cola to prove to you that it was safe to eat your food and be around all of these chemicals. I don't know. I should actually do a search on whether she, if she had an untimely death. Because recently, once again, it was brought up, a friend of mine who's a nurse told me the other day that they're trying to link DDT to breast cancer. So though there really hasn't been any link to DDT and cancer, how could there not be? What a happy little baby. Kill them. Kill all of them for the sake of your health. These deadly pests carry all of these terrible diseases. And the only thing that could eradicate each and every one of them was DDT. And in France, this cute little elephant, the terror of mosquitoes. And then we have the killjoys. Rachel Carson, the author of Silent Spring, who really, in this day and age, I question whether a woman like Rachel Carson and a book like Silent Spring would be published and acknowledged and acted upon the way it was. Silent Spring was published in 1962. The American Robin is what we're going to be talking about right now, as it is connected to this man down below. His name is Dr. George Wallace. And in the 1950s, Dr. Wallace, who was a professor of zoology at Michigan State College, which is now MSU, Michigan State University, was noticing on the property of MSU, a lot of robins dying. And people were collecting dead robins everywhere, specifically robins. And all of these are robins. And every single one of them was tagged. And if you look at the tags on every single one of them, it said, died of tremors, died of tremors, died of tremors. Wallace knew that this was linked to pesticides. And specifically, he thought it was linked to DDT because it was used so prevalent. It was just the pesticide to use. But he didn't have the science to back up his theory. And it ended up being that he was almost drummed out of Michigan State University as being an alarmist, because no other things were dying. Humans weren't dying, other animals weren't dying, nothing was really dying except insects. Who cared? Some birds died, but there was no link. There had to have been some other reason. There had to have been another reason. And so he contacted Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson is a writer and a biologist, a really volatile thing when you are a biologist, so you've got the science behind you, but you also are an eloquent writer. And she put together Silent Spring, but she talks about George Wallace. She knew he was onto something, but again, nobody could prove that DDT was killing these birds. So it got to the point where he was almost a liability. The university thought he was a liability because guess what? DDT's big business. There's a lot of money involved here, lots of money involved in pesticides. And even his colleagues were putting him down. The entomologists were kind of siding with the pesticide companies. Pretty much his zoologist friends were siding with him, but he was a real problem child for the university. And they were afraid they were going to lose a lot of funding if he didn't stop flapping his gums about something that he could not prove. Well, let me see what I've got next up here. There's a picture of George Wallace. I mean, he really and truly, for me, is the hero here, because he was on to this before anybody. It was Rachel Carson was the bullhorn. She was the bullhorn for this, but it was George Wallace who really took it for the team. He really, really took one for the team. She wrote Silent Spring, biologist, ecologist, writer. She protested the use of chemicals, pesticides, the environment for farming, and resulted in the Water Quality Act. She is the reason there's the EPA. She is the reason there is Earth Day. She's the one, and her book published in 1962 triggered the environmental movement. It went all the way to Washington, all the way to President Kennedy, and she moved a mountain that I am unsure in this day and age could be moved today. So at that time, pesticide industry was a $300 million industry, and they had a burr under their saddle about her book. A lot of people called her an alarmist. And again, no science. There was no science behind what this woman was talking about, what Dr. George Wallace was talking about. And our DDT is just so absolutely beloved that, my God, I mean, this can't possibly be that you're trying to stop, you're going to be killing people by eradicating, or eliminating DDT. How could you possibly be doing that? To save a few birds. So here's another picture of Wallace with his table of dead robins. And the smoking gun occurred in 1962, the same year Silent Spring was published. Doctoral candidate, Richard Bernard, his milestone thesis was published in 1962, the same year as Silent Spring, and his thesis was called Field and Lab Studies on the Effects of DDT on Birds. And this is the smoking gun. There was a fisheries department at MSU, and the fisheries department started serving earthworms to their fish, and their fish started dying. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went off in everybody's head, just at the point when poor George Wallace was just getting the stuffing beaten out of him. People were laughing at him in lectures. All of a sudden, we realized that DDT bioaccumulates. So the earthworms are in the ground, and they're feeding off of decayed plant material. The stuff, of course, has been sprayed all over the place, so it's everywhere. The robins are eating the earthworms, and because DDT isn't passed through the system, it's not excreted at all. It goes into their brains, it goes into their fat, their lipids, their fat tissue, it goes into their livers, it causes tremors, and it causes them to die. And I get goosebumps talking about it now, and it's because of Bernard's thesis. That was a smoking gun, and that was the end of it. That was the end of it. It goes off to Washington, D.C. A congressman, John Dingell, brings Wallace to Washington. President Kennedy reads Carson's book, and in 1972, finally, DDT is taken off the domestic market. So Wallace retires in 1972. He kind of disappears into, I think he went to Missouri with his family and just kind of disappears into nothingness. He dies in 1986, when he was, at the same year, issued an honorary doctorate from Michigan State University. A man that literally was crying for help and for people to listen. He was on it. He just didn't have the right thing until Bernard's thesis was published. So DDT also affected other animals. It affected 40 species of birds. The osprey, I'm just going to name a few. The osprey, the brown pelican was one that was really harmed. The peregrine falcon, of course, and the bald eagle, and many other species of birds, because it was causing their eggs to shatter. It was making the walls of their eggs very, very thin. And so birds weren't falling out of the air, and they weren't finding 20 million birds dead everywhere, except in the case of the robin. It affected them a little bit differently. But in terms of egg production, the birds would sit on their nests, and the eggs would just completely disappear. So in what happens in a biomass, you have all those little guys that are eating up DDT and consuming DDT, and then of course the fish is going to get the DDT, and you've got more and more in the fish, and then the osprey is going to be getting the fish, and so it's just this accumulation of DDT, and then the osprey lays its eggs, and they're all messed up, and you get what you almost got. You almost got an extinct species, many extinct species. I'm going to show a movie.
Pesticides weren't always thought to be harmful. To the contrary. In 1947, Time magazine carried an advertisement claiming DDT was good for people, homes, and farms. It took 20 years before scientists realized how dangerous it was.
It begins with the war-born development of DDT. This diabolical weapon of modern science saved millions of humans, but killed billions of insects. Man, with this newly discovered force, has at long last gained the upper hand in our age-old struggle. Just like these mosquito larvae, it came from laboratories where top scientists from famous universities and from industrial and government organizations collaborated to develop something new and different. They succeeded. They perfected Pestroy, the most effective weapon man has ever wielded against insects. To begin with, this new pest killer is a DDT preparation. We realize what that means. Once a bug comes in contact with DDT, he's lost. All he has to do is just walk on any Pestroid-treated surface. DDT is absorbed through the feet and spreads throughout the insect's entire nervous system. The effect is disastrous. DDT seems to literally drive bugs crazy. But not for long. DDT next paralyzes, then kills. In both its forms, powder and liquid, Pestroy means doomsday to us insects. For this new insect destroyer contains a lot of DDT, not just a little. Its DDT content is even higher than government specifications. But the really sure kill feature of this insect killer isn't simply that it contains DDT, it's the way that it makes sure that bugs get the DDT that's in it. The same deadly effectiveness of the liquid form is found in the Pestroy powder. It is so easy to apply because of a new efficient dispenser package. All people have to do is to press the patented top like this. It's a handful of concentrated death. This powder is truly activated. It contains stabilized pyrethrum, an ingredient which literally stampedes insects from their hiding places to bring them into contact with DDT, indoors or outdoors. Stirs them up, drives them out of cracks and crevices.
With the possibility of a serious infantile paralysis epidemic, health authorities of the city of San Antonio, Texas, attacked the germ carriers throughout the city. With the war-discovered DDT in special sprayers, sections of the city are blanketed with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of the dread poliomyelitis. Every suspected spot is sprayed. Even the streams are disinfected, and in the parks and public places, children are forbidden to gather. Tons of DDT are used in this fight against the dread disease, whose principal target is the young. Again, war has contributed one of its discoveries to save life.
From 1945 to 1955, annual pesticide use on farms went from 125 million pounds to over 600 million. Soon, government agencies began treating even the suburbs with DDT.
People thought it was a good thing because they got action in solving a problem as they conceived it. They were, for example, complaining about mosquitoes, and if the spray truck came down the street, they were told to just stay indoors for a few minutes and everything would be all right. So you had the government endorsing a product and you had the chemical industry pushing it very aggressively.
There was a development program going on within the corporate system saying, well, if a little bit is good, a lot more is much better, isn't it?
Public health departments staged demonstrations to convince the public of DDT's effectiveness and safety. Enthusiasm for the chemical knew no bounds, and few were questioning the wisdom of such use. Public places and private backyards were being treated whether people liked it or not. In 1957, planes sprayed a Massachusetts bird sanctuary owned by Olga Huckins, a friend of Carson's. In fury and desperation, Huckins told her what had happened. The birds showed all the symptoms typical of DDT poisoning. Huckins knew that the planes would be back in spite of her protests. She asked Carson for help. Carson later remembered how the thought of a spring silent of birdsong had moved her to action.
It was your personal letter to me that started it all. In it, you told what had happened and begged me to find someone in Washington who could help. It was in the course of finding that someone that I realized I must write the book.
We have to remember that children born today are exposed to these chemicals from birth, perhaps even before birth. Now, what is going to happen to them in adult life as a result of that exposure? We simply don't know.
This is one of the nation's bestsellers, first printed on September 27, 1962.
In her groundbreaking book, Silent Spring, Rachel Carson jolted a prosperous post-war America, a country confident that science and technology were leading the way to a future in which disease and hunger could be overcome, in no small part thanks to a new generation of powerful pesticides. But in Silent Spring, Carson warned that progress had a price.
These sprays, dust, and aerosols are now applied almost universally to farms, gardens, forests, and homes. Non-selective chemicals that have the power to kill every insect, the good and the bad, to still the song of birds and the leaping of fish in the streams. All this, though the intended target may be only a few weeds or insects.
Through sheer determination, Carson participated in an hour-long CBS News documentary on pesticides.
CBS reports The Silent Spring of Rachel Carson,
which aired not long after Silent Spring became a national bestseller.
Can anyone believe it is possible to lay down such a barrage of poisons on the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all life?
While Carson didn't contend that chemical insecticides must never be used, she faced harsh opposition.
A spokesman for the chemical industry, Dr. Robert White Stevens.
The major claims in Miss Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, are gross distortions of the actual facts, completely unsupported by scientific experimental evidence and general practical experience in the field. If man were to faithfully follow the teachings of Miss Carson, we would return to the Dark Ages, and the insects and diseases and vermin would once again inherit the earth.
And when CBS turned to government experts, the questions were many, but the answers few.
Dr. Paige Nicholson, water pollution expert, Public Health Service.
Do you know how long the pesticides persist in the water once they get into it?
Not entirely.
Do you know the extent to which our groundwater may be contaminated right now by pesticides?
We don't know that either, nor do we know if concentration may be occurring in groundwater.
There appears to be growing concern among scientists as to the possibility of dangerous long-range side effects from the widespread use of DDT and other pesticides. Have you considered asking the Department of Agriculture or the Public Health Service to take a closer look at this?
Yes, and I know that they already are. I think particularly, of course, since Miss Carson's book, but they are.
Miss Carson maintains that the balance of nature is a major force in the survival of man, whereas the modern chemist, the modern biologist, the modern scientist believes that man is steadily controlling nature.
Now, to these people, apparently the balance of nature was something that was repealed as soon as man came on the scene. Well, you might just as well assume that you could repeal the law of gravity. The balance of nature is built of a series of interrelationships between living things and between living things and their environment. You can't just step in with some brute force and change one thing without changing a good many others. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that we must never interfere, that we must not attempt to tilt that balance of nature in our favor. But unless we do bring these chemicals under better control, we are certainly headed for disaster.
Rachel Carson, author of the landmark book Silent Spring, started a revolution. During the 1950s, when crop dusting planes and insect sprays blanketed plants with DDT, Carson warned of the dangers of chemical pesticides. She warned of science's power to alter nature and called for government action to protect its citizens. Because of her courage, the disaster did not come to pass, and with Carson's words and spirit, the modern environmental movement was born.
How significant and how relevant all of this is today, with everybody talking about Monsanto and Roundup, and we've come full circle, and yet I just don't know if some of these really detrimental chemicals that are being used today will ever be pulled off the market, because again, what was $300 million back in the 1950s? What is that now? Exactly. So somebody's going to lose a lot of money if we take these products off the market. Somebody's going to lose a lot of money today on DDT if we stop using it in Africa. But in 1959 in Cuba, without the help of the United States, they were able to eradicate malaria with a vaccine, and they're not using DDT in Cuba today. So, you know, it's kind of food for thought. We stand now where two roads diverge, but unlike the roads in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. The road we have long been traveling is deceptively easy, a smooth superhighway on which we progress with great speed, but at its end lies disaster. The other fork of the road, the one less traveled by, offers our last, our only chance to reach a destination that assures the preservation of the earth. Only within the moment of time represented by the present century has one species, man, acquired significant power to alter the nature of the world. A who's who of pesticides is therefore a concern to us all. If we're going to live so intimately with these chemicals, eating and drinking them, taking them into the very marrow of our bones, we had better know something about their nature and their power. And all of those quotes from Silent Spring. Unbelievable how significant and how relevant they are to this day and age.